The United States placed a $15 million bounty on the head of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Not for war, not for politics, but for narco-terrorism. By 2025, that bounty didn't fade. It exploded to $50 million. That's the same price once placed on Osama bin Laden. But this isn't about one man anymore. This is about a nation slowly falling apart, about a country ruled by cartels, corruption, and fear. While the world looks away, millions of Venezuelans are trapped in a system that steals, kills, and destroys. And now, something big is moving. Could it really be the US military? Could they be preparing to erase the cartels forever? Imagine the Caribbean skies dark with spy planes, destroyers loaded with Tomahawks floating off the coast, and Marines, thousands strong, silently closing in. If you thought the drug war was only about Mexico, because Venezuela may be the real front line now. And you'll see why this may not be a patrol, but the prelude to something far more dangerous. This is the untold story of how 2025 may become the year. The US military finally erases Venezuela's cartels forever. Back in March 2020, the United States dropped a bombshell, not from a jet, but from the Department of Justice. They charged Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro with narco-terrorism. The claim? That he was moving cocaine like a cartel boss, not a world leader. The US said Maduro worked with FARC rebels in Colombia. Tons of drugs, billions in profit, deadly power. To the US, this wasn't just a failed president. It was a criminal empire wearing a suit. And the message was loud and clear. Maduro was now a target. The bounty? $15 million, dead or alive. It felt like the start of something big, but few imagined how big it would get, because what began as a legal strike would slowly turn into a military question. And by 2025, that bounty had more than tripled, to the same price once placed on Osama bin Laden. That raises a terrifying question. How does a world leader become one of the most wanted men on Earth? In March 2020, the United States placed a $15 million bounty on Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. That alone was historic. No other sitting head of state had ever been labeled a narco-terrorist like this. The charges? Funneling tons of cocaine into the US, working with FARC rebels, and running a cartel state behind a presidential mask. At the time, some thought it was just political pressure. But then things got serious. By January 2025, the reward doubled. Now $25 million for his capture. And by August 2025, it exploded to $50 million. That's the same number once offered for Osama bin Laden. Let that sink in. Maduro, once seen as just another corrupt leader, was now in the same league as the world's most wanted terrorist. This was no longer a diplomatic dispute. It was a manhunt. In the eyes of Washington, Maduro wasn't just a threat. He was an enemy of the world order. And for the international community watching, the message was clear. He's not safe. He's not legitimate. He's next. Behind the palace gates in Caracas, the pressure was suffocating. Every US movement, every satellite pass, every whisper of Marines setting sail, it all pointed in one direction, toward removal. But here's the deeper question. What made the US raise the stakes so sharply in 2025? What was the trigger? What turned a $50 million bounty into a $50 million global message? Maybe it wasn't a missile, but something else that pushed the US to finally say, enough. In early 2025, the US government made a move that shocked the region. It officially labeled Tren de Aragua and the Cartel de Los Soles as terrorist organizations. Not just drug gangs anymore, but terror groups, the same category as ISIS or Al-Qaeda. This was more than words. This changed everything, because once a group is labeled a foreign terrorist organization, it gives the US military legal authority to strike. Not just arrest, not just sanction, but destroy. Suddenly, Venezuela's drug problem was no longer a criminal case. It became a national security threat. The US could now use drones, special forces, even airstrikes, just like it did in Afghanistan or Iraq. And both cartels were tied directly to Maduro's regime. The Cartel de Los Soles, its members are senior officials in Venezuela's own military and government. The Tren de Aragua, a sprawling crime empire linked to extortion, human trafficking, and murder for hire. So when the labels dropped, it wasn't just about chasing drug lords, it was about targeting the system behind them. Washington was now sending a message. You're not a president, you're a protector of terrorists. And under US law, that means your country is fair game. Venezuela became the first nation in the Americas to host officially designated terror groups with the full support of its government. That's why U.S. generals began reviewing plans, why warships started changing course, and why satellites began watching Venezuela non-stop. So the laws had changed. Now came the hardware. What does it look like when a superpower prepares to strike? In August 2025, a Reuters report confirmed the rumors. 3 U.S. Navy destroyers had moved into position near Venezuela's coast. These weren't ordinary patrols. They were the USS Gravely, the USS Jason Dunham, and the USS Sampson. All 3 are part of the Arleigh Burke class, Aegis-equipped, heavily armed, and battle-tested. Each ship is called a Swiss Army knife of the sea. Why? Because they can launch Tomahawk missiles, intercept aircraft, and jam enemy radar, all at once. But it wasn't just ships. Alongside them came roughly 4,000 U.S. Marines, 4,500 sailors and Marines in total, deployed quietly, with no press release, no war declared, no speeches made, just steel on water, and eyes fixed on Venezuela's shoreline. Inside each ship, missile tubes sat loaded. On the decks, helicopters were fueled and waiting. In the command room, screens tracked every radar ping, every movement, every heat signal. This wasn't just a training drill. The message was clear. We're ready, if needed. We strike. But why now? Why these ships? Why this location? Because Venezuela's coast is strategic. It faces the Caribbean Sea, near vital trade routes. It gives U.S. forces access to launch zones, but also pressure points. And the cartels? They don't just move drugs on land. They use boats, submarines, and offshore docks, which means control of the coast is control of the game. The world had to wonder, were these warships just meant to scare Maduro? Or were they the first wave of something more? So the ships arrived, but the skies were even more revealing. What was flying above Venezuela that no one could see? Until it was too late. They weren't just ships floating off the coast. They were an arsenal, a moving fist waiting for a signal. The destroyers, Gravely, Dunham, Sampson, each carried over 90 Tomahawk missiles. Each missile could hit a target 1,000 miles away, with precision. Then came the Silent Hunter, a U.S. Navy attack submarine submerged nearby. Its role, ISR, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and strike if needed. From the shadows, above the water, the P-8 Poseidon soared, a sleek surveillance aircraft built from a Boeing 737, but inside, it's packed with radar, sonar buoys, and undersea detection tech. It can track submarines, drug boats, or enemy movements in real time. Every hour, it scanned the Caribbean Sea. Every hour, it fed data back to U.S. command. This wasn't just a show of force. It was calculated pressure. The kind of pressure that tells a regime, we know where you are. We know what you're moving. And if needed, we know how to stop you. It wasn't just about deterrence anymore. This was a war-ready formation. Land strikes? Possible. Radar jamming? Ready. Marine landing? Minutes away. The arsenal was built for one thing: flexibility. If the White House gave the word, targets would vanish, runways would crater, radios would go dark. But was this really the plan? To strike Venezuela? To remove Maduro? Or was this pressure to make him fold? To make the cartels run? To make the regime break from within? If you want to track every twist, every move, every message, every missile, then subscribe now for more real-time stories shaping tomorrow's world. And tell us in the comments, do you think the US will hold back? Or is a direct hit on Venezuelan soil now inevitable?